Claire Reynolds never expected a simple act of compassion to cost her everything. Fired for feeding a hungry child, she lost her job, only to gain an unexpected opportunity from the boy's powerful father. But as kindness opens doors, it also invites enemies. Will Claire's past destroy her future? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun hadn't even risen when Claire Reynolds tied her worn apron around her waist at Joe's diner. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she wiped down the counter for the 100th time. At 35, she had spent more hours in this diner than she could count, but she never complained. A job was a job, and she needed every penny to keep her tiny apartment. "Order up," Sam, the cook, called out. His voice carried over the clatter of plates and the hum of early morning conversations. Claire grabbed the plates, balancing them expertly on her arms. "Here you go, Mrs. Henderson," she said with a warm smile, setting down a plate of scrambled eggs. "Extra crispy bacon, just how you like it?" The elderly woman beamed back at her. "You're an angel, Claire. Don't let anyone tell you different." The morning rush came and went like it always did. Claire's feet ached, but she kept moving. The regulars all knew her by name, and she knew their orders by heart. Some days that familiarity was all that kept her going. During her break, Claire sat at the back of the diner, unwrapping the simple sandwich she'd made at home. Times were tough, and bringing lunch from home saved money she couldn't afford to spend. That's when she saw him through the window. A small boy, couldn't be more than 7 or 8, digging through the dumpster in the alley. Her heart stopped. The boy's clothes were dirty and torn, his face smudged with grime. But it was his eyes that got to her, big, brown, and filled with a hunger that no child should know. Without thinking twice, Claire walked out the back door. "Hey there," she said softly, not wanting to frighten him. The boy jumped, ready to run. "It's okay," Claire said, holding up her hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. Are you hungry?" He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the sandwich in her hands. "Here," she said, holding it out along with her apple. "It's not much, but it's fresh. I made it this morning." The boy stared at her like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then, with trembling hands, he took the food. The way he ate broke Claire's heart, like someone who didn't know when their next meal would come. "What's your name?" she asked gently. But before the boy could answer, the back door slammed open. There stood Jerry, the manager, his face red with anger. "Claire, what do you think you're doing?" "Jerry, please," Claire started to explain. "He's just a hungry child. That food belongs to paying customers." Jerry's voice boomed through the alley. "You can't just give away food whenever you feel like it. This isn't a soup kitchen." The boy, startled by the shouting, clutched what was left of the sandwich and disappeared around the corner. "I'll pay for it," Claire said quickly. "Take it out of my paycheck." "Oh, you'll pay for it all right," Jerry sneered. "By cleaning out your locker, you're fired." Claire felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "But Jerry, I've worked here for 3 years. Should have thought about that before playing St. Clair of the dumpster," he spat. "Get your things and get out. Now." With shaking hands, Claire untied her apron. The other waitresses watched in silence as she cleaned out her small locker. 3 years of her life ended because she couldn't stand to see a child go hungry. Walking. Out into the morning sun, Claire felt numb. Her rent was due in 2 weeks. Her savings wouldn't last long, all because she'd followed her heart instead of the rules. She found herself walking to the small park across from the diner. Sitting on a bench, she tried not to cry. The spring air was cool, but she barely noticed. How was she going to make it now? A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, its engine purring quietly. Claire hardly paid attention until she heard a familiar voice. "That's her. That's the nice lady." The boy from the alley was running toward her, but he looked different. His face was clean, his clothes neat and expensive looking. Behind him walked a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, his presence commanding attention without trying. "Daddy, she's the one who helped me," the boy said, grabbing his father's hand and pulling him toward Claire. Claire stood up, confused. "Daddy?" This well-dressed man was the father of the boy she'd found digging through. "Trash? Miss Reynolds?" the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Alexander Chase, and this is my son, Tommy." Claire shook his hand automatically, still trying to process what was happening. "I understand you lost your job today because you helped my son," he said, his voice carrying a weight of authority. "Your son," Claire managed to say. "But he was... I mean..." Alexander's face softened. "Tommy ran away this morning. We had a disagreement about his video games. He decided to teach me a lesson by disappearing. We've been looking for him for hours." Tommy looked down at his shoes, shamefaced. "I got lost," he admitted, "and hungry. But she was nice to me, Daddy. She gave me her lunch even though she didn't know who I was." Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "Ms. Reynolds, I own Chase Restaurant Group. We have 30 restaurants across the state, everything from diners like the one you just left to five-star establishments." Claire took the card with trembling fingers, reading the gold lettering. "Alexander Chase, CEO. We're actually opening a new location downtown," he continued. "And I find myself in need of someone with good judgment, strong ethics, and most importantly, a kind heart to manage it." Claire's eyes widened. "Mr. Chase, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Tommy piped up, grinning. "Please?" "The position starts at $60,000 a year with full benefits," Alexander said. "Of course, you'll need some training first, but I have a feeling you're a quick learner." Claire felt tears welling up in her eyes. Just minutes ago, she'd been wondering how she'd make rent. Now, "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Alexander looked at his son, then back at Claire. "Because in my experience, Ms. Reynolds, kindness is rare in this world. And when you find someone who shows it without expecting anything in return, well, that's the kind of person I want running my restaurants." As Claire stood there, holding the business card that could change her life, she realized something. Sometimes the biggest rewards come from the smallest acts of kindness. And sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of finding something better. Tommy tugged at her hand. "Will you say yes? Please?" Claire looked at the hope in the little boy's eyes, then at the genuine smile on his father's face. And for the first time that day, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. But little did she know, this was just the beginning of a story that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone around her. Because sometimes the price of kindness isn't what you lose, it's what you gain in return. The Chase Restaurant Group headquarters took up the entire top floor of a gleaming downtown office building. Claire stood in the elevator, smoothing down her new navy blue dress, the only nice outfit she owned. Her heart pounded as the numbers climbed higher and higher. "Good morning, Ms. Reynolds." A friendly receptionist greeted her as she stepped out. "Mr. Chase is expecting you." Claire couldn't help but notice how different this was from Joe's diner. The marble floors gleamed, and everything smelled like fresh coffee and success. She felt out of place, like someone was going to realize she didn't belong here and ask her to leave. Alexander Chase stood as she entered his office. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows made the room glow. "Claire, welcome to Chase Restaurant Group." "Thank you, Mr. Chase," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Please call me Alex," he smiled, gesturing for her to sit. "After all, we're going to be working closely together." Before Claire could respond, the office door burst open, and Tommy ran in. "Claire!" he shouted, throwing his arms around her waist. "You came!" "Tommy," Alex said with a gentle warning tone. "What did we say about interrupting meetings?" The boy's face fell. "Sorry, Daddy, but I wanted to see Claire. Can I stay, please?" Alex looked at Claire, who couldn't help but smile at Tommy's enthusiasm. "Well, we are discussing the new family restaurant. Perhaps we could use a child's perspective?" Tommy beamed, pulling up a chair right next to Claire. Now, Alex began, opening a folder on his desk. "The new restaurant will be called Home Plate. We're aiming for an upscale family dining experience, something between a casual diner and a formal restaurant. The kind of place where families can have a special dinner without breaking the bank." Claire nodded, thinking of all the families at Joe's who saved up for months just to have one nice meal out. "Before we talk about management training, though," Alex continued, his expression growing serious, "there's something you should know. The location we've chosen, it's right across from Joe's diner." Claire's stomach dropped. "Oh, if that makes you uncomfortable." "No," Claire said quickly. It's just Jerry, my old manager. He can be a bully, Tommy piped up. Tommy, Alex warned again, but Claire saw a flash of anger cross his face. We've actually heard similar complaints about that establishment, which is partly why we chose that location. We believe people deserve better. As they discussed the plans, Claire felt her confidence growing. Alex explained everything clearly, answering all her questions without making her feel stupid for asking. Tommy chimed in with suggestions about the kids' menu and what games they should have available. But their meeting was interrupted by a sharp knock. A tall, elegant woman strode in, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Alex, darling, we need to discuss the charity gala. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were in a meeting. Victoria, Alex stood up. This is Claire Reynolds, our new manager for Home Plate. Claire, this is Victoria Sterling, our Director of Public Relations. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes as she shook Claire's hand. How interesting. Alex, you didn't mention you'd hired someone new. It was a recent decision, Alex said firmly, and a good one, Tommy added. But Victoria barely glanced at him. Well, we simply must discuss the gala, Victoria insisted. The board members will all be there, and after that unfortunate incident with your last restaurant manager, we can discuss it later. Alex cut her off. Claire and I have work to do. Victoria's perfectly painted lips tightened. Of course, Claire, welcome to the team. She turned and left, her perfume lingering in the air. Don't mind Victoria, Alex said once she was gone. She's excellent at her job, but she can be intense. Claire nodded, but she recognized that look in Victoria's eyes. It was the same. Look the popular girls in high school used to give her, like she was something stuck to the bottom of their expensive shoes. The rest of the morning flew by as Alex showed her around the office. They visited the training kitchen where she'd learn about food preparation and quality control. They reviewed staffing plans and budget projections. It was overwhelming, but exciting. At lunch, Tommy insisted they all eat together in the building's cafe. As they sat there, Claire couldn't help but notice how other employees stared at them. She heard whispers. Who is she? How did she get this job? Did you hear she used to be a waitress? Don't let them bother you, Alex said quietly, noticing her discomfort. They don't know your worth yet, but they will. As Claire took a bite of her sandwich, so different from the simple one she'd given away just yesterday, Tommy regaled them with stories about school and his upcoming soccer game. Will you come watch me play, Claire? He asked hopefully. Before Claire could answer, Victoria appeared again, setting her salad down next to Alex. I hope you don't mind if I join you. Alex, we really must discuss the gala. It's this Saturday, and you still haven't confirmed your +1. Tommy's face fell. But Daddy, you promised to take me to the movies on Saturday. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. Surely the nanny can take him. This is important, Alex. The board members are expecting you to make an appearance. Claire watched Alex's face cloud over with guilt. She saw the same look she'd seen on so many single parents at the diner, torn between work and family, never enough time for both. Actually, Claire heard herself saying, I could take Tommy to the movies if that's okay with both of you, of course. Tommy's eyes lit up. Really? Can she, Daddy? Please? Alex looked at Claire with surprise and something else. Gratitude, maybe? You wouldn't mind? It's your day off. Not at all, Claire smiled. I love movies. Victoria's fork clattered against her plate. How generous of you, though it seems rather inappropriate for an employee to... I think it's a wonderful idea, Alex cut in. Thank you, Claire. As they finished lunch, Claire couldn't help but feel that something important had just happened. She'd stood her ground against Victoria's subtle hostility. She'd helped Alex out of a difficult situation, and somehow in less than 2 days, she'd gone from unemployed waitress to restaurant manager and movie date with the boss's son. But as she watched Victoria whispering to a group of well-dressed employees, their eyes darting her way, Claire realized something. Getting fired from Joe's might have been the easy part. Proving she belonged in this new world, that would be the real challenge. What she didn't know was that Saturday's movie date would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything, not just for her, but for Alex, Tommy, and the entire Chase restaurant group. Because sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest choices, and sometimes the hardest part isn't getting the chance. It's being brave enough to take it. Saturday morning arrived with a mix of excitement and nerves. Claire stood in front of her bathroom mirror, trying to decide if her casual jeans and sweater were appropriate for taking her boss's son to the movies. Everything in her life had changed so fast, she barely had time to process it all. Her tiny apartment felt different now. The creaky floors and water-stained ceiling that had once seemed like symbols of her struggle now felt temporary. In just her first week of training, she'd learned more about restaurant management than she'd learned in 3 years at Joe's Diner. A knock at her door made her jump. She wasn't expecting Tommy for another hour, but when she opened it, she found Victoria Sterling standing there in a designer outfit that probably cost more than 3 months of Claire's old salary. "May I come in?" Victoria didn't wait for an answer, walking past Claire into the apartment. Her eyes scanned the small space, a slight grimace on her perfect face. "Quaint." "What can I do for you, Ms. Sterling?" Claire asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Victoria turned, her smile as sharp as a knife. "I'll be direct, Claire. You need to cancel your plans with Tommy today." "Excuse me?" "Alex needs to take Tommy to the gala tonight. It will look better for the board members to see him as a devoted father." Victoria adjusted her expensive bracelet. "I've already spoken to Alex about it." Claire felt her heart sink. "Then why isn't Alex telling me this himself?" "He's busy preparing for tonight. I offered to deliver the message." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Listen carefully, Claire. I've worked with Chase Restaurant Group for 5 years. I know what's best for this company and for Alex. And what exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you're in over your head. A waitress doesn't become a restaurant manager overnight, not without other motivations." Victoria's implication hung in the air like poison. The board members are already asking questions. A scandal is the last thing Alex needs right now. Before Claire could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Tommy can't wait for the movies. He's been talking about it all morning. Thank you again for doing this." Claire looked up from her phone, a new strength in her voice. "I think you should leave, Ms. Sterling. I have a movie date to prepare for." Victoria's face hardened. "You're making a mistake." "No," Claire said firmly. "The only mistake would be letting you bully me the way Jerry did. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get ready." After Victoria left, Claire sat down, her hands shaking. The text from Alex proved Victoria had lied. But why? What was her real agenda? An hour later, a much happier knock announced Tommy's arrival. He burst in with his usual energy, Alex following behind. "Claire, I got popcorn money." Tommy held up a $20 bill proudly. "Very responsible," Claire laughed, then caught Alex's eye. "Would you like to come in?" Alex stepped inside, looking around with interest rather than judgment. "So this is where you live?" "It's not much." Claire started to apologize, but Alex shook his head. "It's a home," he said simply. Then, lowering his voice, "Did Victoria stop by this morning?" Claire's surprise must have shown on her face. "She mentioned she might," Alex sighed. "Whatever she said, I hope you know it doesn't reflect my views or the company's." "She suggested I cancel today's plans," Claire admitted. "Said you needed to take Tommy to the gala." Anger flashed across Alex's face. That wasn't her place. Tommy's been looking forward to this all week, and honestly, he glanced at his son, who was examining Claire's small collection of DVDs. "I'm glad he's spending time with someone who sees him as more than just a CEO's son." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Claire felt something shift between them. "But," Tommy's voice broke the spell, "can we get ice cream after the movie, please?" Alex chuckled. "One treat at a time, buddy." He checked his watch. "I should get going. Victoria will have my head if I'm late to the pre-gala meeting." As they walked to Claire's car, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Through the tinted windows, she could just make out Victoria's silhouette. The movie theater was crowded with Saturday matinee families. Tommy clutched his popcorn as they found their seats, chattering excitedly about the superhero movie they were about to watch. But halfway through the film, he grew quiet. "Everything okay?" Claire whispered. Tommy's lower lip trembled. I miss when Daddy used to take me to movies before Mum left. Claire's heart squeezed. He misses it too, Tommy. I can tell. Victoria says he's too busy now. She says he needs to focus on the restaurants. Tommy's voice got very small. She says she's going to be my new mom. Claire felt like she'd been punched in the gut. So that was Victoria's game. After the movie over ice cream, because Claire couldn't resist Tommy's pleading eyes, she tried to choose her words carefully. Tommy, has Victoria said anything else about being your new mom? Tommy swirled his spoon through his sundae. She told Daddy they should get married. For the company. I heard them fighting about it. Claire's mind raced. Victoria's hostility, her desperation about the gala, her warnings to Claire, it all made sense now. She wasn't just protecting the company, she was protecting her own plans. When they pulled up to Alex's house, a beautiful mansion that made Claire's apartment look like a closet, Tommy gave her a tight hug. Thanks for today, Claire. You're way nicer than Victoria. Inside, Alex was waiting, his bow tie undone and a tired look on his face. How was the movie? Awesome. Tommy launched into a detailed plot description. He was a perfect gentleman, Claire added. We even had ice cream after. Alex smiled, but Claire could see the strain around his eyes. Thank you, Claire, really. He hesitated. Listen, about the gala tonight. Daddy, can Claire come? Tommy asked suddenly. Please. Victoria said you need a +1. Alex's eyes widened. Tommy, that's not... I mean, Claire probably has plans. Actually, Claire said, surprising herself, I'm free tonight. The words hung in the air between them. Alex stared at her, and for a moment Claire thought she'd made a horrible mistake. Then he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I'd like that, he said softly. If you're sure. Tommy was bouncing with excitement. You can wear one of Mum's old dresses. They're still in the closet because Victoria says they're not fancy enough for her. As Claire followed Alex and Tommy upstairs to find a dress, she couldn't help but wonder what she was getting herself into. In just 1 week, she'd gone from waitress to manager to the CEO's +1 at a gala. But more importantly, she'd stumbled onto Victoria's carefully laid plans. And if there was one thing Claire had learned from her years of serving people, it was how to spot trouble brewing. The gala wasn't just a party, it was a battlefield. And Claire had just walked right into the line of fire. What she didn't know was that by the end of the night, everything would change. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting back, it's showing up in the first place. Claire stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror of Alex's guest room. The dress she wore had belonged to Tommy's mother. A classic, black evening gown that fit like it was made for her. Tommy sat on the bed, grinning. You look like a princess, he declared. Daddy's gonna think so too. Maria, the housekeeper, finished pinning Claire's hair up. The young master is right, she smiled, her eyes twinkling. It's been a long time since we've seen anyone wear Mrs. Chase's clothes. Victoria tried once, but Mr. Chase, well, he wasn't pleased. Claire touched the soft fabric nervously. Maybe this isn't appropriate. I mean, these are his ex-wife's things. Mom left because she didn't want to be a family anymore, Tommy said matter-of-factly. She sends me birthday cards from Paris, but she's not coming back. Before Claire could respond, there was a knock at the door. Alex stood there in his tuxedo, and for a moment, they both just stared at each other. Claire, you look... He stopped, his eyes soft. Beautiful. Tommy bounced off the bed. I told you she looked like a princess. Alex smiled at his son. You did, and you were right. He turned back to Claire. Are you ready? The car's waiting. The drive to the Grand Plaza Hotel was quiet, filled with a tension Claire couldn't quite name. Alex kept glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking. Finally, he spoke. I should warn you about tonight. The board members can be difficult, and Victoria will be there with her claws out, Claire finished. At Alex's surprised look, she added, Tommy told me about her marriage plans. Alex's jaw tightened. Victoria has certain ideas about what's best for the company and for me. He looked at Claire directly. Ideas I don't share. They pulled up to the hotel where photographers lined the entrance. Claire's stomach lurched. You didn't mention press. Just local business papers, Alex assured her, then grinned. Scared? Terrified, she admitted. Good. He took her hand. So am I. The ballroom was a sea of designer dresses and expensive suits. Claire felt eyes on her immediately. She heard the whispers start. Isn't that the new manager? The waitress? Is she wearing Sandra's dress? Victoria appeared as if by magic, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than Claire's yearly salary at Joe's. Her smile was arctic. Alex, darling, the board members are asking for you. Her eyes raked over. Claire, and that dress, how interesting. Claire is my guest, Victoria, Alex said firmly. I expect everyone to treat her accordingly. Of course, Victoria purred. We're all very interested in getting to know her better, especially after that. Seen at her apartment this morning. Claire felt Alex's hand tighten on hers. Seen? Oh, didn't Claire tell you about our little chat? About what's appropriate and what isn't? Before Alex could respond, an elderly man approached them. Alex, we've been waiting to corner you about the new restaurant. Mr. Whitman, Alex nodded. I'd like you to meet Claire Reynolds, our new manager for Home Plate. The man's eyebrows rose. Ah, yes, the former waitress. Victoria was just telling us about your unusual hiring practices lately. Claire felt her cheeks burn, but she straightened. Her spine. Years of handling difficult customers had taught her something about grace under pressure. Mr. Whitman, she smiled, I was hoping to discuss my ideas for Home Plate's community outreach program. Since you're on the board, I'd love your input. The next hour was a blur of introductions and conversations. Claire spoke about her experiences, her plans for the restaurant, her ideas about combining quality with accessibility. To her surprise, people started listening. Even Mr. Whitman seemed impressed. Remarkable young woman, she overheard him telling Alex later. Quite different from what Victoria led us to expect. But Victoria wasn't done. As Claire stood alone, by the champagne fountain, she heard the click of expensive heels behind her. Having fun playing Cinderella, Victoria's voice dripped with disdain. Enjoy it while it lasts. The board might be charmed by your little rags to riches story, but we both know what this really is. And what's that? Claire asked quietly. Publicity stunt. Alex's way of showing how charitable the company is. Give a waitress a chance, make some headlines. Victoria stepped closer. But he'll never really let someone like you into his world. Not the way he'll let me in. Is that what this is about? You want to marry Alex? I want what's best for this company. Alex needs someone who understands this world. Someone who can help him lead, not someone who just learned which fork to use for salad. You don't love him, Claire realized. Or Tommy, this is about power. Victoria's laugh was cold. Love, please, this is business, and in business, little girls who play dress-up eventually have to go home. Is everything all right here? Alex's voice made them both turn. Victoria's face transformed instantly. Just giving Claire some tips about navigating our world. Speaking of which, the reporters would love a statement about Home Plate. Something about second chances and American dreams. But Alex wasn't looking at Victoria. He was looking at Claire, concern in his eyes. Dance with me. On the dance floor, Claire finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Your world is exhausting. It's not my world, Alex said softly. It's just where I work. His hand was warm on her back. Claire, about Victoria's, I need to tell you something. But before he could continue, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Claire turned to look, and her heart stopped. Jerry, her old manager from Joe's Diner, stood there in a rumpled suit, his face red with either drinking or anger. Or both. There she is, he shouted, pointing at Claire. The thief! The music screeched to a halt. Every head in the ballroom turned. Victoria's smile was triumphant as she stepped forward. Security, please escort this man. No, Jerry slurred. Everyone needs to hear this. She stole from me, money from the register. That's the real reason she was fired. Claire felt the room spinning. That's not true, she whispered. But Jerry was on a roll now. Check her background, check the police reports. She's a criminal. Alex stepped in front of Claire protectively. That's enough. Ask her, Jerry demanded. Ask her about the missing money. Ask her what really happened 5 years ago at the Golden Crown restaurant. Claire's world tilted sideways. How did he know about that? Nobody knew about that. Unless... She looked at Victoria, who was watching the scene unfold with perfectly feigned shock. But there was something else in her eyes, satisfaction. Somehow Victoria had found out about Claire's past, the past she'd tried so hard to forget. And now, in front of everyone, including Alex, the truth was about to come out. Because 5 years ago something had happened at the Golden Crown restaurant. Something that had changed Claire's life forever. Something she'd never told anyone. And now, in one horrible moment, her second chance was about to shatter like a champagne glass on marble floors. The ballroom was silent, except for the echo of Jerry's accusation. Claire felt every eye on her, judging, wondering. Alex still stood protectively in front of her, but she could see the question in his stance. He wanted to believe in her, but doubt had crept in. Victoria's voice cut through. The silence. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," Claire said firmly. Her voice was stronger than she felt. "Everyone wants to know about the Golden Crown restaurant? Fine, let's talk about it." Jerry swayed on his feet, pointing at her. "She stole... I didn't steal anything," Claire interrupted. "But something did happen at the Golden Crown, something I've tried to forget for 5 years." Alex turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "Claire," she took a deep breath. "I was a waitress there, just like at Joe's. One night I was closing up alone. The owner's son came in drunk, demanding money from the register. When I refused..." She closed her eyes, remembering. "He got violent, pushed me against the wall, tried to take the keys." A murmur went through the crowd. Victoria's smug expression faltered slightly. "I fought back," Claire continued. "In the struggle he fell and hit his head. Not hard, but he was drunk, dramatic. He told his father I attacked him, tried to rob the register. His father owned half the restaurants in that neighborhood. No one would hire me after that. No one except Joe's." "That's not what I heard," Jerry slurred, but he looked less certain now. "Really?" Claire turned to him. "What exactly did you hear, Jerry? What did Victoria tell you to say?" The room turned to Victoria, who maintained her perfect composure. "I simply did my due diligence, looking into your background." "You did more than that." Alex's voice was cold. "You orchestrated this whole scene. Had Jerry show up drunk to cause a scandal?" "I was protecting the company," Victoria snapped, her mask finally cracking. "You can't just bring some waitress with a criminal record." "She doesn't have a criminal record," a new voice spoke up. Everyone turned to see Mr. Whitman, the elderly board member, stepping forward. "I made some calls after Victoria brought her concerns to the board. The Golden Crown incident was investigated. No charges were ever filed because witnesses came forward. The owner's son had a history of similar behavior." Claire felt tears in her eyes. All these years, she'd never known anyone had spoken up for her. "But that's not the most interesting thing I discovered," Mr. Whitman continued, looking at Victoria. "Would you like to tell everyone about your connection to the Golden Crown restaurant? About your brother, the owner's son?" The color drained from Victoria's face. Alex's eyes widened with understanding. "This was personal for you. You knew who Claire was the moment I hired her. He was just blowing off steam that night." Victoria's composure shattered completely. "She ruined his life. He lost everything because of her." "He ruined his own life," Claire said quietly, "and you've been trying to ruin mine ever since you recognized my name." Security finally arrived to escort Jerry out. He went quietly, looking confused, like he was just realizing he'd been used. Victoria lifted her chin defiantly. "Everything I did was for the good of the company. This woman isn't one of us, Alex. She doesn't belong in our world." "No," Alex said, taking Claire's hand. "She belongs in mine." "Alex," Mr. Whitman stepped forward. "As chairman of the board, I think we need to discuss Miss Sterling's position with the company." Victoria's face went pale. "You can't fire me. I've given 5 years to this company." "And in one night, you've shown a complete lack of judgment and ethics," Mr. Whitman replied. "The very qualities we most need in our leadership." As security escorted Victoria out, her final words rang through the ballroom. "This isn't over, Athit." Party slowly resumed, but Claire felt drained. Alex led her to a quiet corner. "Why didn't you tell me about the golden crown?" "I wanted to," she whispered. "But I was afraid. That past has followed me for so long. Every time I thought I'd escaped, it—" "Like today," Alex finished. He touched her cheek gently. "Claire, look at me. What happened tonight? You didn't just survive it. You stood up, you told your truth, and you know what? What? Every person in this room saw exactly why I hired you. Your strength, your dignity, your grace under pressure. Those aren't things you can buy or learn in business school." Claire leaned into his touch. "I was so scared I'd lose everything. Again." "You didn't lose anything," Alex smiled. "If anything, you've gained about 50 powerful allies. I've never seen the board members so impressed, or so angry on someone's behalf." A waiter appeared with champagne, and Mr. Whitman joined them, raising his glass. "To our new manager," he said warmly, "and to justice, even if it takes 5 years to arrive." As conversations resumed around them, Alex kept hold of Claire's hand. "There's something else you should know," he said softly. "Tommy's been asking if you could come over for Sunday dinner tomorrow. He says you make him feel like he has a real family again." Claire's heart swelled. "I'd like that. So would I." Alex's eyes were warm. "Very much." As they stood there, surrounded by the glittering crowd that had just witnessed her darkest secret and chosen to stand with her, Claire realized something. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us exactly where we need to be. And sometimes, when the truth finally comes out, it doesn't destroy us, it sets us free. But Victoria's words echoed in her mind. This isn't over. And deep down, Claire knew she was right. Because in her experience, people like Victoria didn't give up easily. They just changed tactics. The question was, what would Victoria do next? And more importantly, was Claire ready for it? Looking at Alex's steady presence beside her, at the supportive faces of the board members, at the future suddenly spreading out before her, Claire found her answer. Yes, she was ready. Because this time, she wasn't facing her battles alone. What she didn't know was that Victoria's next move would test not just her strength, but everything she'd come to believe about love, loyalty, and the true price of second chances. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Claire stood in her kitchen, carefully packing the apple pie she'd baked for dinner at Alex's. Her hands shook slightly as she remembered the events of last night, the gala, the accusations, the truth finally coming out. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Tommy's already set the table. 3 times. Someone's excited to see you." Claire smiled, but her happiness was interrupted by a knock at her door. When she opened it, she found a courier holding an envelope. "Claire Reynolds." He handed her the envelope and left. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Her heart stopped when she saw the letterhead. Golden Crown Restaurant. The message was simple. "You took everything from my son. Now it's my turn." Richard Sterling, Victoria's father. The man who had blacklisted her 5 years ago. Claire's phone rang, making her jump. It was Maria, Alex's housekeeper. "Miss Claire, I'm sorry to bother you, but someone's here at the house, Victoria's brother, James. He's demanding to speak with Mr. Chase about you. He's very angry." Claire's hands gripped the phone tighter. "Is Alex there?" "No, he took Tommy to soccer practice, but James won't leave. He's saying terrible things about you to anyone who'll listen." "I'm on my way," Claire said, grabbing her keys. When she arrived at Alex's mansion, she found James Sterling, pacing on the front steps. He looked different from that night 5 years ago. Thinner, harder, his expensive clothes slightly shabby. "Well, well," he sneered when he saw her. "The little waitress who ruined my life." "You ruined your own life," Claire said firmly, though her heart was pounding. "Just like Victoria ruined her career. My sister lost everything because of you." He stepped toward her menacingly. "Our family name meant something before you came along. Your family name?" Claire stood her ground. "You mean the name you used to terrorize other waitresses, the name that made everyone too scared to speak." "Up." "You broke the code," he hissed. "Everyone knew how things worked. Keep quiet, play along, and the Sterling family takes care of you. But you had to be different." "I had to be honest," Claire corrected him. "Something your family wouldn't understand." "Honest?" James laughed bitterly. Let's talk about honest. Let's talk about how you fooled Alex Chase into thinking you're some kind of saint. The poor noble waitress who just wants to help people. Leave Alex out of this. Why? Because you're afraid he'll see who you really are? A nobody who got lucky. James pulled out his phone. Maybe we should call him right now. Tell him about all the other restaurants you've worked at, all the times you've played the victim. There weren't any other restaurants, Claire said quietly. Your father made sure of that. And now, history repeats itself. James smirked. Dad's already making calls. Every restaurant in the city will know your name by tomorrow. Even Alex won't be able to protect you. The sound of a car pulling up made them both turn. Alex's Ferrari stopped at the bottom of the steps, Tommy jumping out from the passenger seat. Claire. Tommy ran toward her, but stopped when he saw James. Who's that? Alex was right behind his son, his face darkening when he saw who was at his house. James Sterling. I thought I made it clear to your sister that none of you are welcome here, just having a friendly chat with your new project. James's smile was ugly. Catching up on old times. Leave, Alex's voice was cold, before I call the police. No need, James held up his hands. I've said what I came to say. He looked at Claire one last time. Enjoy your Sunday dinner, while you can. After he left, Alex pulled Claire into his arms. Are you okay? Maria called me about James showing up. Claire showed him the letter from Richard Sterling. They're not done, Alex. They're going to try to destroy me again. Tommy hugged her waist. Don't let them scare you, Claire. Daddy won't let them hurt you. Alex kissed the top of her head. Tommy's right. You're not alone this time. Inside, the house smelled like Maria's famous pot roast. The dining room table was indeed perfectly set. Claire could see why Tommy had needed 3 tries to get it right, but the peaceful family dinner they'd planned felt overshadowed by James's threats. Maybe I should go, Claire said quietly. If the Sterlings are really going to start a campaign against me, it could hurt the company, hurt you. No, Tommy's eyes filled with tears. You can't leave. You're family now. Alex knelt in front of his son. Tommy, could you help Maria in the kitchen for a minute? I need to talk to Claire. Once Tommy left, Alex took Claire's hands in his. Listen to me. 5 years ago, the Sterlings hurt you because you were alone, because they had all the power. That's not true anymore. Alex, your reputation is only improved by standing up to bullies like them. His eyes were fierce. Do you know what the board chairman told me after you left last night? He said it was about time someone exposed the Sterlings for what they are. Their family name has been poisoning this industry for years. But James said your restaurants will not be intimidated by Richard Sterling's threats. Alex cupped, her face in his hands. Claire, when you gave Tommy your lunch that day, you didn't know who he was. You just saw someone who needed help. That's who you are. That's who I... He paused, then continued softly. That's who I'm falling in love with. Claire's heart stopped. What? I love you, Alex said simply. And I'm not letting the Sterlings chase away the best thing that's happened to me and Tommy in years. Before Claire could respond, Tommy's voice came from the doorway. Does this mean Claire's going to be my new mom? They turned to find Tommy and Maria watching them, both grinning. Maria wiped her eyes with her apron. The pot roast is ready, if anyone's still interested in dinner. Claire looked at Alex's loving face, at Tommy's hopeful eyes, at Maria's motherly smile. This was what the Sterlings could never understand. Real power didn't come from money or family names. It came from love, from truth, from standing up for what's right. Dinner sounds perfect, she said, squeezing Alex's hand. But as they sat down to eat, Claire's phone buzzed with another message. This one was from Victoria. Enjoy playing house with my leftovers. Tomorrow everyone learns who Claire Reynolds really is. And trust me, I've saved the best secrets for last. Claire put her phone away, refusing to let Victoria poison this moment. But she couldn't help wondering, what else had Victoria discovered? What secrets could be worse than what had already come out? Tomorrow would bring its own battles. But tonight, she had something the Sterlings never would, a real family, built on love instead of fear. And she would fight with everything she had to protect it, Because sometimes the biggest test isn't standing up to your enemies. It's believing you deserve the happiness you found. Monday morning hit like a thunderstorm. Claire arrived at the Chase Restaurant Group offices to find the lobby buzzing with whispers. People stopped talking when she walked by, their eyes following her with a mixture of pity and curiosity. "Claire," Alex's assistant rushed up to her. "Mr. Chase needs you in the conference room now." When Claire walked in, she found Alex standing at the window, his back rigid with tension. Mr. Whitman sat at the conference table, looking grave. And on the table was a stack of newspapers. "Have you seen them?" Alex asked without turning around. Claire picked up the top paper. Her heart sank as she read the headline, "Chase Restaurant Group Scandal, the dark truth about the Cinderella story." Below was a photo of her, clearly taken years ago, standing next to a familiar face, one she'd tried so hard to forget. "My brother," she whispered. Alex finally turned to face her. "Victoria found him." "Claire," Mr. Whitman spoke gently, "we need to know everything, before Victoria releases whatever else she has." Claire sank into a chair, her legs weak. "I haven't seen Michael in 10 years, not since he went to prison," Victoria's voice came from the doorway. She walked in, holding a manila envelope. "For robbery, the same crime his sister would later be accused of." "Get out," Alex snapped, but Victoria just smiled. "Oh, I don't think you want me to leave, not before everyone hears the whole story." She looked at Claire. "Should I tell them, or should you?" Claire closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her carefully built new life starting to crumble. "Michael was my older brother. He got involved with bad people, started stealing to pay gambling debts." "And?" Victoria prompted, clearly enjoying herself. "And one night, he asked me to help him. Said he just needed me to be a lookout while he borrowed money from the restaurant where he worked. I was 16. I said no." Claire's voice cracked. "The next day he did it anyway. Someone got hurt. He went to prison." "But that's not the interesting part." Victoria opened her envelope. "Tell them what happened to the money." Claire's head snapped up. "How did you find out?" "Amazing what people will tell you when you offer enough money. Your brother was very chatty during my prison visit yesterday." Alex stepped forward. "Whatever you're trying to prove, she took the money," Victoria announced triumphantly. After her brother went to prison, little Claire found his hidden stash, $40,000, and instead of turning it in, Victoria pulled out a document. She kept it, used it to survive after the Sterling family blacklisted her. The room was silent. Claire felt Alex's eyes on her, but she couldn't look at him. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Claire whispered. "I found the money. I was 17, alone, couldn't get work anywhere because of the Sterlings. I used it to survive, to finish school, to start over." "You're no better than your brother," Victoria said smugly. "A thief is a thief." "That's enough." The sharp voice made everyone turn. Sandra Chase, Alex's ex-wife, stood in the doorway. Claire's heart stopped. The woman whose dress she'd worn to the gala, Tommy's mother, stood there in elegant business attire, her expression fierce. "Sandra?" Alex looked stunned. "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning up this mess," Sandra strode in. "Victoria was kind enough to send me all her evidence about Claire. Thought I'd want to know about the woman spending time with my son." Victoria smiled. "Then you understand why you're a vindictive snake who needs to be stopped." "Yes, I do." Sandra pulled out her own envelope. "See, after I got your little package, I did my own research. Found some interesting things about the Sterling family's business practices, about all the young women who've been terrorized into silence over the years." Victoria's smile faltered. "And then," Sandra continued, "I found something even more interesting, about what really happened to the money from your brother's robbery." "What?" Claire looked up, confused. Sandra turned to her kindly. "The money you found? It wasn't from the robbery. That money was recovered at the scene. What you found was Sterling family hush money, paid to your brother to take the fall for James's crimes." The room erupted in chaos. Victoria went pale. Mr. Whitman stood up, calling for security. "That's a lie," Victoria shouted. "Is it?" Sandra raised an eyebrow. "Should we ask your father? I'm sure the press would love to hear his side of the story." Why? Claire asked Sandra. Why are you helping? Me, Sandra's face softened. Because I've watched you with my son. Tommy talks about you in every phone call. He says you make him feel loved, not just important. She looked at Alex. And because I've seen how my ex-husband looks at you, the same way he used to look at me before I chose my career over our family. Victoria backed toward the door. This isn't over. Your father is currently being investigated by the Restaurant Association Board, Mr. Whitman interrupted. Thanks to some anonymous tips about years of corruption and intimidation. And the evidence about James? Alex asked Sandra. Being delivered to the district attorney's office as we speak. Sandra smiled grimly. The Sterling Empire is falling. Victoria, I'd suggest you get a good lawyer. After Victoria was escorted out, Claire finally found her voice. I should have told you about the money. About Michael. Yes, you should have, Alex said. Then he smiled. But I understand why you didn't. Shame is a heavy burden to carry alone. The money, Claire started, but Sandra interrupted, was blood money from a corrupt family. You survived, Claire. No one can blame you for that. Mr. Whitman cleared his throat. Well, I think we can all agree that Claire's position with the company is secure. In fact, he smiled, I'd say her story makes our new restaurant's mission even more compelling, a place where everyone gets a second chance. Speaking of second chances, Sandra looked at Claire and Alex. Tommy's been begging for a family dinner with all of us, even his, what did he call you, almost mum? Claire blushed, but Alex took her hand proudly. I'd like that, Claire said softly, as they left. The conference room, Claire felt lighter than she had in years. Her past was finally out in the open, all of it. And instead of destroying her, it had made her stronger. But one question still nagged at her. Who had really tipped off Sandra about the Sterling family's corruption? The answer would come sooner than she expected, and from the last person she would have guessed, because sometimes the truth has a way of coming out in waves, and the biggest wave was still to come. The news of the Sterling family's downfall spread through the restaurant industry like wildfire. By Wednesday morning, Richard Sterling had resigned from the Restaurant Association Board. James Sterling was brought in for questioning about the old robbery. And Victoria had disappeared. Claire sat in her new office at home plate reviewing construction plans when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Claire Reynolds speaking. Hello, little sister. Her heart stopped. Michael? Surprised to hear. From me. Her brother's voice was different than she remembered. Older, tired. I guess I owe you a call after spilling your secrets to Victoria Sterling. Claire gripped the phone tighter. Why did you do it, Michael? Why tell her everything? Because she promised to help get my sentence reduced. Promised to make sure I got paroled this year. He laughed bitterly. Guess that's not happening now. Sorry? Don't be. I'm the one who's sorry, Claire, for everything. For asking you to help with the robbery, for leaving you alone to deal with the Sterlings, for telling Victoria about the money. Claire fought back tears. You were protecting James Sterling all along, weren't you? Taking the fall for his crime. They paid good money for my silence. Money you found, Michael paused. But that's not why I'm calling. Then why? Because I'm the one who sent the evidence to Sandra Chase. Claire nearly dropped the phone. What? After. Victoria visited after I told her everything about you. I felt sick. Started thinking about all the years I wasted protecting the Sterlings. So I wrote it all down. Everything I knew about their schemes, their threats, their payoffs. Sent it to the one person I thought might actually help you. Tommy's mother, Claire whispered, found her name in a magazine article about her fashion company. Figured any woman who gave up the Chase fortune to follow her dreams might understand something about second chances. A knock at her office door made Claire look up. Alex stood there, concern on his face. Michael, I have to go, she said quickly. Wait, her brother's voice was urgent. There's something else you should know about Victoria. What about her? The day after she visited me, she came back, but not alone. She brought someone else to see me, someone who might explain why she disappeared. Claire's blood ran cold. Who? Tommy's real mother. The phone slipped from Claire's fingers. Alex rushed forward. Claire, what's wrong? She stared at him, her world tilting on its axis. Sandra, Sandra isn't Tommy's biological mother, is she? The color drained from Alex's face. How did you... Victoria found her, didn't she? Tommy's real mother? The woman Sandra and you have been protecting him from all these years. Alex sank into a chair. Her name is Rebecca Sterling, Victoria and James's youngest sister. Claire felt like she couldn't breathe. Tommy is a Sterling. Rebecca was 19 when she got pregnant. Her father wanted her to get rid of it. Said it would ruin the family name. Sandra and I, we were trying to have a baby with no success. Rebecca agreed to let us adopt Tommy as long as we kept her identity secret, even from him. And Sandra agreed to be listed as his birth mother to protect him, to give him a normal life away from the Sterling family's influence. Alex ran his hands through his hair. When our marriage fell apart, she still kept the secret, still protected him. Does Tommy know? No, and now Victoria's found Rebecca, found a way to hurt all of us at once. Claire's phone buzzed with a text, another unknown number. Meet me at St. Mark's Park. 1 hour. Come alone. You want to protect Tommy. This is your chance. V. Claire showed Alex the message. It's a trap, he said immediately. Let me call the police. No. Claire stood up. Victoria's desperate, cornered. That makes her dangerous. Exactly why you shouldn't meet her. She has Tommy's mother, Alex, his real mother. What if Rebecca wants him back? What if Victoria's planning to tell him everything? Alex looked stricken. He's not ready for that truth. He's just a little boy. Claire touched his face gently. Let me talk to Victoria, woman to woman. Maybe I can make her understand what she's about to destroy. I can't lose you, Alex whispered. Either of you. You won't. Claire kissed him softly. But Tommy deserves better than having his world blown apart by Victoria's revenge. Let me try to stop this. As Claire drove to St. Mark's Park, her conversation with Michael replayed in her mind. All those years ago, the Sterlings had paid her brother to cover up James's crime. Now they were about to pay an even higher price for their lies. The park was quiet when she arrived. Victoria sat on a bench near the fountain, alone. Where's Rebecca? Claire asked, approaching cautiously. Safe. Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. For now. What do you want? Want? I want my life back. I want my family's reputation restored. You want to hurt Tommy? Claire interrupted. An innocent child. Victoria flinched. He's my nephew. He's a little boy who thinks his biggest worry is winning his next soccer game. Are you really going to destroy that? My sister deserves to know her son. Your sister gave him up, Claire said softly. She chose to give him a better life. Away from your father's corruption, away from your family's lies. You don't understand anything about our family. I understand enough. Claire sat down beside her. I understand that you're not really angry at me or Alex or even Tommy. You're angry at your father, for making you all keep his secrets, for turning your brother into someone who would attack innocent women, for forcing your sister to give up her baby? Victoria's hands trembled. Stop. You wanted to marry Alex to protect Tommy, didn't you? To keep him close, keep him safe from the truth, to be a better parent than your father was. Tears rolled down Victoria's perfect makeup. Rebecca wants to see him just once before what? Before she goes to the district attorney. She's going to testify against our father, about everything. Victoria looked lost like a little girl. Our whole family is falling apart, Claire. I don't know how to stop it. Maybe it needs to fall apart, Claire said gently. Maybe that's the only way to rebuild something better. Victoria pulled out her phone, showed Claire a photo. A young woman with Tommy's eyes smiled at the camera. This is the only picture I have of my sister, Victoria whispered. She left the country after giving up Tommy. Couldn't bear to stay to see him grow up calling another woman mom. But she's back now, and she wants to destroy his world, to hurt him the way your father hurt her. Victoria's shoulders slumped. No, she wants to know he's happy, that she made the right choice. Then tell her he is happy. Tell her he's loved, not just by Alex and Sandra, but by someone who understands what it means to lose everything and find your way back. They sat in silence, watching the fountain sparkle in the afternoon sun. Finally, Victoria spoke. "I'll send Rebecca away. Help her start fresh somewhere else. But I want something in return." "What?" "Take care of him. Love him the way our family." "To never knew how." Victoria stood up. "And maybe someday when he's older, tell him that his real mother loved him enough to give him his best chance." As Victoria walked away, Claire's phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Are you okay? Is Tommy safe?" Claire looked at the retreating figure of Victoria Sterling, a woman who had tried to destroy her, only to end up destroying her own family's web of lies instead. "We're all safe," she texted back. "Coming home now." Because that's what the Chase mansion had become: home. Not just for her, but for all of them. A place where secrets could heal, where truth could set you free, and where love was stronger than any family name. But as Claire drove back to Alex and Tommy, she wondered, had they really heard the last of the Sterling family? Or was this just the calm before an even bigger storm? The morning of Home Plate's grand opening dawned crisp and clear. Claire stood in the newly finished dining room, adjusting table settings and trying to calm her nerves. The restaurant was everything she'd dreamed of, elegant but welcoming, fancy enough for special occasions but comfortable enough for family dinners. "Need help?" Sandra's voice made her turn. Alex's ex-wife stood in the doorway, looking perfectly put together as always. "Thanks," Claire smiled, still getting used to their unlikely friendship. "I keep thinking I've forgotten something important." Sandra picked up a stack of menus. "You haven't. I've opened enough restaurants to know. You're more than ready." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Sandra spoke again. "Have you told Alex about Rebecca's letter?" Claire paused in her table, arranging. "Not yet. It doesn't seem right, keeping it from him. You're protecting Tommy. Just like we all are." Sandra straightened a chair unnecessarily. Rebecca made her choice again. Tommy doesn't need to know his biological mother chose to leave the country rather than face her family's crimes. But someday, when he's older, we'll tell him the whole truth. Together. Sandra touched Claire's arm. "That's what family does. The real kind, not the kind that uses their name like a weapon." The door chimed as Alex walked in, Tommy bouncing beside him in his new suit. "Claire!" Tommy ran to hug her. "Do you like my tie? Dad says it's just like his." "Very handsome." Claire straightened the little blue tie that did indeed match Alex's. "Are you ready to be our official taste tester?" "Yeah, Dad says I get to try everything on the menu." "For within reason," Alex laughed, kissing Claire's cheek. "The health department might have something to say about a sugar-crashed kid on opening night." Maria appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "The staff is all here, Miss Claire. The kitchen is ready." "Thanks, Maria." Claire looked around at her assembled family, Alex with his gentle strength, Sandra with her fierce protectiveness, Tommy with his innocent joy, and Maria with her steady support. "I couldn't have done any of this without all of you." "Actually," Alex cleared his throat, "there's someone else who helped make this happen." He nodded toward the door. Claire turned to see her brother Michael standing there, looking uncertain, in new clothes that still couldn't quite hide his prison pallor. "Michael?" Claire whispered. "Surprise," Alex smiled. "His parole came through yesterday. Mr. Whitman pulled some strings, considering his cooperation in the Sterling case." Michael stepped forward hesitantly. "The DA said my testimony about James and the old robbery changed everything. They're reviewing all the Sterling family's dealings now." "Uncle Michael," Tommy ran forward, making everyone freeze. "Dad told me all about you. He says you're going to help in the kitchen." Michael looked stunned. "Uncle? Every family needs a good chef," Alex said firmly, "and from what Claire's told me, you were quite the cook before. Everything." "I don't deserve," Michael started, but Claire cut him off with a hug. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she whispered. "That's what Home Plate is all about." The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. By evening, the restaurant was full of familiar faces. Mr. Whitman and the board members sat at one table, clearly impressed with the food. Claire's old regulars from Joe's Diner occupied several others. She'd made sure they all got special invitations. In the kitchen, Michael had already won over the staff, with his quiet competence and genuine passion for cooking. Even Sandra, who had been skeptical about hiring an ex-con, admitted he had a gift. "Claire?" Tommy tugged at her hand during a quiet moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Are you going to marry Dad?" Claire caught her breath. Behind Tommy, she saw Alex pretending not to listen while he chatted with guests. "Would that be okay with you?" she asked carefully. Tommy considered this seriously. "Yeah. But what?" "But I already think of you as my mom. The one who stayed." "So the wedding would just be like official?" Claire felt tears in her eyes. She knelt down to Tommy's level. "You know I love you, right? No matter what?" "I know," Tommy said simply. "That's why you're different from Victoria or Mom or," he hesitated, "or my real mom." Claire's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Tommy looked down at his shiny new shoes. "I heard Dad and Mom, Sandra Mom, talking about the Sterlings, about Rebecca." His voice got very small. "She didn't want me, did she?" Claire pulled him close. "She wanted you to have your best chance. Sometimes love means making really hard choices. But you chose to stay." Tommy's voice was muffled against her shoulder. "Even when Victoria was mean, even when everything was hard." "Yes," Claire stroked his hair, "and I always will." "Then that's all that matters." Tommy pulled back, wiping his eyes. "Can I go help Uncle Michael in the kitchen?" Claire watched him run off, her heart full. Alex appeared beside her, taking her hand. "He knew," she said softly. "About Rebecca." "He's smarter than we give him credit for," Alex sighed. "Are you okay?" Claire looked around the restaurant, at Michael teaching Tommy how to plate a dessert, at Sandra charming the board members, at Maria proudly supervising her new staff. "I'm perfect," she smiled. "This is perfect." Alex squeezed her hand. "You know, Tommy asked me something this morning." "About weddings," Claire teased. "About timing." Alex reached into his pocket. He wanted to know if tonight was the right time. "To give you this." Claire's breath caught as Alex pulled out a small velvet box. "He helped pick it out," Alex continued softly. "Said it had to be special because you're special." "Alex." He opened the box, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. "I had this whole speech planned, about second chances and fresh starts, about how you changed not just my life but all our lives, but really it comes down to this. We love you, Claire Reynolds. Will you marry us?" Claire looked at Tommy, who was watching from the kitchen door with Michael, at Sandra, who was smiling knowingly, at all the faces of people who had become her family, not by blood or name, but by choice. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." The restaurant erupted in applause. Apparently everyone had been in on the surprise. As Alex slipped the ring on her finger as Tommy ran to join their hug, as Michael popped open champagne and Sandra wiped away tears, Claire realized something. The Sterlings had spent years using their family name as a source of power, but real power, real family, wasn't about names at all. It was about love, about choosing to stand by each other no matter what. And as she looked at her new ring sparkling under the restaurant lights, Claire knew that while her story had started with a simple act of kindness, it had grown into something much more precious. A family built on love, truth, and the courage to begin again. But even as they celebrated, none of them could have guessed that their happiness was about to face one final test. Because sometimes, just when you think your happy ending is secure, life has other plans. 6 months after Homeplate's opening, Claire stood in the bridal suite of St. Patrick's Cathedral, looking at herself in the mirror. Her wedding dress was simple but elegant, much like the path that had led her here. "Something borrowed," Sandra said, fastening a pearl necklace around Claire's neck. "It brought me luck on my wedding day. Well, for a while at least." She winked. Maria fussed with Claire's veil. "Something blue," she added, pointing to the tiny blue flowers in Claire's bouquet. "And something new." Tommy burst in, carrying a small box. "Dad said to give you this." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. The inscription read, "Love is the greatest second chance." Claire fought back tears as Tommy helped her put it on. "Perfect. Just one thing missing," a voice said. from the doorway. Michael stood there in his tuxedo, looking healthy and happy after 6 months of freedom. In his hands was an old worn locket. Something old, Mom's locket. I kept it all these years, even in prison, thought you should have it today. As Michael fastened the locket around her neck, a commotion in the hallway caught everyone's attention. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. Mr. Whitman appeared in the doorway, out of breath. "Claire, you need to... the news." Sandra turned on the TV in the corner. Breaking news flooded the screen. Sterling family patriarch dead, suicide note, reveals all. Claire sank into a chair as the news anchor's voice filled the room. Richard, Sterling, former restaurant industry titan, was found dead in his office this morning. Sources say he left behind a detailed confession, admitting to years of corruption, intimidation, and criminal activities. But most shocking is his final revelation about his grandson, Tommy Chase. "Turn it off," Claire said quickly, looking at Tommy, but the boy was already glued to the screen. In his confession, Sterling reveals that his youngest daughter, Rebecca, was forced to give up her baby, now known as Tommy Chase, in a complex scheme to protect the Sterling family name. The confession includes evidence of illegal adoptions, falsified documents. Sandra switched off the TV. The room was silent except for Tommy's shaky breathing. "Is it true?" he whispered. "Everything about why she gave me away?" Claire knelt in front of him, not caring about her dress. "Tommy, listen to me. Family isn't about blood or papers or legal documents. It's about love. About choosing each other every day. But she didn't choose me." Tommy's voice cracked. "And now everyone will know." "No," a new voice said firmly. They all turned to see Alex in the doorway, handsome in his tuxedo, but his face tight with concern. "Everyone will know that you are loved. By me, by Claire, by Sandra, by all of us. That's the only truth that matters." "The press is outside," Mr. Whitman warned. "They're asking for statements about Tommy, about the adoption." "Then let's give them something to talk about," Sandra said suddenly. Everyone looked at her. "Let's give them a real story. About love that's chosen, not forced. About family that's built, not born." "What do you mean?" Claire asked. "I mean," Sandra smiled, "let's have more than a wedding. Let's have an adoption. Right here. Right now." Alex's eyes widened. "Can we?" Mr. Whitman pulled out his phone. "Judge Martinez is here for the wedding. She can process the papers right now, make Claire legally Tommy's mother, just like she's already his mother in every way that matters." Tommy looked up at Claire, hope breaking through his tears. "Really?" Claire looked at Alex, who nodded encouragingly. "Really," she said, "if that's what you want." "I want my real family," Tommy said firmly. "The one that chose me." The next hour was a blur of activity. Judge Martinez arrived with papers. Sandra signed away her legal rights with a smile, making room for Claire to step in officially. Michael and Mr. Whitman served as witnesses. When they finally opened the church doors, the press was indeed waiting. But instead of a scandal, they got a story of love, of Claire and Alex exchanging vows, of Tommy legally becoming Claire's son moments before she became Alex's wife, of a family choosing each other in front of God and everyone. Later, at the reception at home plate, Tommy stood to make a speech. His little voice carried across the crowded restaurant. "A long time ago, Claire gave me her lunch when I was hungry. She didn't know who I was. She just knew I needed help. That's what real family does. They help because they want to, not because they have to." He looked at Claire and Alex. "Some people are born into their families, but I think the best families are the ones we build ourselves, with love and trust and second chances." Claire felt tears rolling down her cheeks as Tommy continued. "So I don't care what was in some old man's letter. I don't care what the news says. I know who my family is. It's my dad, who works too hard, but always has time for me. It's Sandra, Mom, who loved me enough to let someone else love me too. It's Uncle Michael, who makes the best chocolate cake ever." The crowd chuckled as Tommy took a deep breath. "And it's my mom, Claire, who taught me that sometimes the best things in life start with just being kind, even when it's hard, even when you lose everything. Because sometimes losing everything is how you find what you're really looking for." As applause filled the restaurant, as Alex kissed her tears away, As Tommy hugged them both, Claire thought about how far they'd all come. From a simple act of kindness to a complex web of love, loss, and redemption, the Sterling family had tried to build their legacy on fear and power. But in the end, they had given Claire the greatest gift of all, the chance to build something better. A family based on choice, on love, on the simple truth that kindness, even in our darkest moments, can light the way home. Later that night, as the party wound down, Claire found Tommy sitting at the fountain in the restaurant's courtyard. "Happy?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Yeah," he smiled. "But I was thinking about Rebecca, a little, but mostly about that day you gave me your lunch. Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Claire pulled him close. "Sometimes the best stories start with just one small act of kindness. Everything else, that's just love doing what love does best." "What's that?" Finding its way home. Inside, Alex was waiting with their family, Sandra chatting with Michael about new menu items, Maria proudly showing off pictures of the wedding. To the staff, Mr. Whitman raising a final toast. This was her home now, her family, her happy ending. And as Tommy took her hand to lead her back inside, Claire remembered that scared waitress who had lost everything for being kind. If only she could tell that woman what was waiting for her. Not just a job or a love story, but a whole family built on the foundation of that one simple choice. Because in the end, that's what kindness really costs. Not what we lose along the way, but what we gain in return. A truth Claire had learned and would never forget. Sometimes the price of kindness is everything you have, but its reward is everything you could ever want.